Well, we are here again. The United States is, yeah, you've probably heard me say this before, escalating with China over Taiwan. And this story has not received much attention at all. And it may seem like small fries in the context of just utter disasters like the Ukraine proxy war, the $100 million spent per day on the Ukraine proxy war, much of that coming from the coffers of the collective West directly to Ukraine's so-called budget, and then directly onto a battlefield that is literally grinding Ukrainian forces into mincemeat. But this is still huge because, as I've said before here, Taiwan is to China what Ukraine is to Russia, despite the differences in maybe the international recognition of the aforementioned parties, right? Taiwan being a territory of China under the One China Principle, which is under UN Resolution 2758, legally recognized as part of China, while Ukraine, of course, since the fall of the Soviet Union, has been recognized as a sovereign state, despite all of the cultural, social, economic, and linkages to Russia that have all since been severed because mainly because of this conflict, but over the decades that the United States and West have spent trying to get to this point. But now we are seeing just over and over and over again. And when I was talking to Carlos Martinez and Ken Hammond on a stream September 6th, they both said that Biden has been worse on Taiwan and on military affairs toward China, military escalations for China, than Trump. And that is true. And it's no more true than this question of Taiwan. So even in just the last several weeks, right? Let's just look at the month of August to the month of September 2023. We saw $300 plus million more, $345 million to be exact, I believe, in military aid from the direct drawdown authority used for Ukraine be promised and committed to Taiwan, including parts for F-16s, etc. Then you had the Department of State, the State Department, use its FMF program, which is considered a special program for supplying arms diplomatically, mind you, to sovereign states, to Taiwan at a tune of $85 million. Not much, but really the significance here was the political symbolism. The FMF program is for sovereign states. Taiwan is, in fact, not a sovereign state. It is a territory of China, despite the One China Principle outlining the one system to one country, two systems model, right? That there is a Taiwan authority, but it's not an independent government recognized as a nation state. That's what the One China Principle is. The FMF program, even if it's just 85 million, it seems like nothing, right? It seems like pennies compared to what the United States overall has been pumping into Taiwan. Still, it is a symbolic violation of the One China Principle and really an escalation. Now there is further escalation that didn't get really any attention outside of Japanese media. In this report, I'm going to show you of the Taipei Times, which is a pro-independence, pro-separatism, Taiwan-based media outlet. And the Taipei Times talked about Japanese media reporting something big here, that troops from Taiwan joined Michigan drills in July. The exercises were led by the U.S. National Guard instead of the U.S. Armed Forces so as not to provoke China, said the Sankei Shimbun report. So that's a Japanese media outlet. But notice the emphasis on National Guard. So in a sense, what they're saying is, well, the National Guard isn't for forward deployment. It isn't for interventionism. So that makes it better. Well, that could be argued. It could be argued that it's still a huge escalation to be taking up arms inside of the United States with troops ostensibly from Taiwan when it is not a country, it is a territory of China. That seems to be a pretty big deal, a pretty big violation. More than 7,000 soldiers from several countries participated in the exercises in Michigan from August 5th to August 19th, said the Japanese Daily. Following the joint exercises last summer, Taiwan and the U.S. have continued to deepen military exchanges and enhance interoperability. It is unclear how many Taiwanese troops attended the exercises, but the scale was larger than previous training with the U.S., said the Senkai Shimbu. Now, mind you, this is something that's been going on for a while. It was reported, um, I believe it was within the last year, that in 2021, that there were special operation forces of the United States troops operating in Taiwan doing training with troops. So this has been a long time coming. And there was 100 of them, right? An increase, a massive increase. That like I think that quadrupled the amount that was officially reported. Taiwan could also send more troops to attend similar training. It was reported in July that the armed forces sent an entire joint battalion of the Army's 333rd Infantry Brigade to Michigan for training and to participate in the summer Northern Strike exercise organized by the U.S. Senkai Shimbu said that not to provoke China too much, the Michigan exercises were held by the National Guard, Strategic Reserve Force that is normally overseen by U.S. state governments instead of the U.S. Armed Forces. The U.S. National Guard also helped train Ukrainian soldiers after Russia's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. So there you go. I mean, they're saying two things at once here, right? That it's not an escalation because the National Guard is just is just funded by state governments. It's not for deployment. It's not about going around the world and enforcing any diktats of the United States. But then you hear that the National Guard trained Ukrainian forces after Crimea was admitted to the Russian Federation by referendum. And what did U.S. training of Ukrainian forces eventually lead to? It led to this conflict. It led to this war. So it's a lie. It's a lie. It's escalation. Joe Biden's administration in February said that Xi Jinping had instructed his nation's military to be ready by 2027 to invade Taiwan. Mind you, Taiwan, Joe Biden has commented, I don't know how many times, 4 times, that the United States would militarily defend Taiwan from China in case of invasion, basically saying the one China principle is scrap heap to him. The U.S. also announced assistance of $345 million to Taiwan in July through the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which requires no approval from U.S. Congress. It also approved a military transfer of $80 million under its foreign military financing program last week. So there's the context I was outlining. Those are all the escalations all at once. As early as 2021, foreign media have reported that joint military training between Taiwan and the U.S. at Camp Grayling in Michigan, Institute of National Defense Security Research Fellow, Institute of National Defense and Research Fellow Su Tzu Yun said. So this has been happening for a while, perhaps, but this is another kind of feather in the cap, so to speak. Asked in July whether the U.S. National Guard helped Taiwanese troops train, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense Indo-Pacific Affairs Eli Ratner said discussions about the issue should be kept behind closed doors. So don't say nothing about this because it might anger China. And guess what? We're already in a losing war in Ukraine. So we can't just start this one up just yet, no matter how much we want to. So this is what's going on, okay? This is what's going on. The U.S. has trained directly Taiwan troops, and it's happened again. It happened this summer, and China's not happy about it. So here's what China had to say. This is from the China military website, republishing the Global Times. U.S.'s intention to turn Taiwan Island to a powder keg laid bare in military drills. So citing sources from Japanese media on Sunday, it was reported that Taiwan Island last month attended military exercises led by the U.S. National Guard in Michigan. A Chinese military expert and TV commentator, Song Zhongping, told Global Times that Taiwan troops' participation in U.S. National Guard exercises shows that Taiwan Island is enhancing cooperation with all levels of U.S. military forces, including the National Guard, while at the same time strengthening its urban terrain capabilities, operational capabilities in the case of urban war. A research fellow at the Institute of Taiwan Studies at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Zhang Hua, echoed Song's view, adding that the U.S. and the island are confusing the cause and effect. They say their cooperation is a result of pressure from the mainland, but fail to mention that the pressure is a result of Taiwan independence. And indeed, that is a big part of this. The U.S. has been flirting, but really outright instigating and provoking separatism on the island ever since the Sunflower Movement in 2014 really sparked a public display of this through its soft power mechanisms. But this has been a long time coming. I mean, the United States has been interfering in Taiwan, since it wasn't even called Taiwan, right? Since it was called Formosa. I mean, this is the United States' hope. And what it hopes is to turn Taiwan into an unsinkable aircraft carrier as colonial Japan viewed Taiwan. So although Japanese media reported it was the National Guard instead of the U.S. Armed Forces that led the mission exercises, an arrangement in a bid to not provoke China too much, the two Chinese experts believe it actually constitutes a full-scale challenge against China and that the depth and width of cooperation between the U.S. and Taiwan forces is expanding. The U.S. keeps arming Taiwan by selling large amounts of weapons and equipment there and encouraging Taiwan to reject reunification by force, a move that aims to incite tensions across the straits and will inevitably exacerbate tensions between the China and the U.S., which may lead to a conflict. The U.S. is unwilling to confront the Chinese People's Liberation Army directly. What it hopes more is a wolf pack tactic that relies on its allies. But at the same time, the U.S. is worried that allies such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia may not be willing to come to the front line to participate should a war break out. Therefore, its strategy is to encourage self-defense of the Taiwan authorities with training, exercises, weapons, and equipment provided by the U.S., all aimed at enabling Taiwan authorities to achieve this goal. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive, right? What they're saying is that what these Chinese experts believe is that, well, the United States is actually provoking conflict, that cooperates quite obvious that there is an escalation ladder here and that the United States is climbing up the steps with each passing policy move, right? That this is going on and on and on from the FMF to increase funding, right? It just keeps happening over and over and over again, and that there is this inherent lack of trust in the overall strategy that the United States has set out with China to wage war by proxy. You had Wang Yi early in September warn NATO or warn the United States more so, and more so warning ASEAN countries of the United States and NATO attempting to use the region as a Ukraine repeat. So that warning was all about this larger strategy to use countries in Asia to wage a dirty conflict on China, similar to what has happened with Ukraine against Russia. And so this is quite easy to see, and Taiwan is a big part of this. So the lack of trust in this leads the United States to depend really fully on Taiwan and to militarize Taiwan to the largest extent possible. So China is really citing a weakness here. But they're connected as well, right? This policy to militarize Taiwan and this policy to use Asian countries in the Pacific as kind of battering rams and launching pads for this war. Actually, they're so connected that a recent U.S. move here late in August, here's Reuters, what they had to say, and they're exclusive, they said. U.S. military talks to develop a port in the Philippines facing Taiwan. So in Manila, the U.S. military is in talks to develop a civilian port in the remote northernmost islands of the Philippines. The local government and two other officials told Reuters a move that would boost American access strategically located islands facing Taiwan. U.S. military involvement in the proposed port in the Bantenese Islands, less than 200 kilometers from Taiwan, could stoke tensions at a time of growing frictions with China and a drive by Washington to intensify its long-standing defense treaty engagements with Philippines. Mind you, earlier this year in 2023, we had the Philippines opening up 4 military bases for the United States to essentially occupy and use in what is an ongoing attempt to wage a dirty war on China, to militarize the region for those purposes. The Bashi Channel between these islands and Taiwan is considered a choke point for vessels moving between the Western Pacific and the contested South China Sea, a key waterway in the case of Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The Chinese military regularly sends ships and aircraft through the channel, Taiwan's defense ministry has said. Malau Kaiko, the provincial government of the Batanese Islands, told Reuters in a message she sought funding for the U.S. for the building of an alternative port there, which was intended to assist from unloading of cargo from the capital, Manila, during rough seas in the monsoon season. She said plans were to build a port in Barco Island where local authorities say high waves often make the existing port inaccessible, and that decision could be made in October. The Philippines has in the past year doubled its number of military bases that U.S. forces can access, ostensibly for humanitarian assistance, and also as thousands of U.S. troops in the country at any given time, rotating in and out for joint military exercises. China has said these moves were stoking the fire of regional tensions. The Chinese embassy in Manila did not immediately respond to a request for comment proposed on the proposed port in Basco. And so here it would be. So here you see the Bashi Channel where the ships would be sailing through. And here you have Bantonese Islands in the Philippines. So essentially, what they want to do is they want to militarize the Bantonese Islands in order to essentially choke off China in a very aggressive and provocative move. Two other Philippine officials who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to speak to the media said U.S. troops had visited Bantonese recently to discuss the port. One senior military official said the Filipino armed forces were interested in radar and improving monitoring capabilities in the area. Keiko confirmed the visit, saying they came one time to assess the proposed alternative port. It comes as Washington pursues closer ties with Asian nations to counter China in the Asia Pacific, including the Philippines, its former colony and treaty ally. So Marcos, this new leader, who is the son of the former dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, his son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he's the president there. And unlike Duterte, who had threatened to cap U.S. Philippines military alliance and realign the country with China, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is doing the opposite. He has sought closer ties with Washington, expanded foreign military bases, including several close to Taiwan. They're not in the Bantonese and announced joint patrols in the South China Sea. He said that the bases under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement could prove useful if China attacked Taiwan. So he's all in. Okay, he's a puppet of the United States essentially. He doesn't have an independent bone in his body. He is going for the gusto. And the Philippines and China have already gone into it. So here you have the Philippines and China have also clashed in recent months over disputed waters in the South China Sea, with Chinese vessels firing water cannons as a Filipino vessel tried to send supplies to an outpost. Keiko said she didn't have any conversation with the U.S. about EDCA or radar installations. And so there's a lot of conflicting reports there. But I think the main impetus is that the U.S. is seeking to escalate with China over Taiwan by using the Philippines as a launching pad. And the building of a port to give the U.S. military access to potential monitoring capabilities and other military capabilities is part of this process. And so there you have it. I mean, you have just over and over and over, and it just doesn't stop, right? The escalations with China over Taiwan just do not stop. They continue, and they only get worse. And so we're in now a very interesting time, right? Terry Guo, you might have heard as well. I didn't pull up a story for this, but he is a former board member and major executive at Foxconn, the much controversial Foxconn, right? Taiwan-based, but has mainland dealings. Terry Guo, who is more on the side of the one China principle because of his business operations, and anyone rational, given the China mainland and Taiwan economic relations, would be calling for the one China principle. But warmongers will be warmongers. But Terry Guo, he's about to run for president. He actually stepped down from the board of Foxconn to do so. And it's an interesting moment as January 2024 elections come rapidly. You have a majorly divided vote within the Taiwan Authority over who's going to replace Tsai Ing-wen, who has resigned, mind you. She is not running again under the DPP ticket. It's Lai Ching-te who is running now, and he has the lead because the opposition vote from the KFT to a few other political parties, they are divided, and that is the main discourse happening with the Taiwan election. So it's unclear whether we will see the DPP in power again. But Terry Guo is now entering. What Guo is saying is he wants to unite the opposition parties under his proposal for almost kind of like a de facto alliance to unseat the DPP and to restore better relations with China. We will see whether this works. And of course, Terry Guo is a he's a mega billionaire. He is a business mogul. And you could say he would be almost like a Trump figure in some respects without, of course, the vitriol toward China. He is very much about the one China principle. So now there is another kind of wrench thrown into the 2024 elections in Taiwan, which have taken on increased significance, right? Almost like how the BRICS summit has took on an incredibly important significance because of the conflict in Ukraine and because of just how fast the US led unipolar imperial order has rotted during this last couple of years, and how de dollarization and multipolarity have accelerated. So too has the US's escalations and Biden's escalations with Taiwan made the election in the Taiwan Authority even that much more critical now that these two countries, the US and China, are really on the brink of war. And I talk about it a lot in this way because I think it is underestimated to many degrees. I think there's still a lot of people out there who think, well, it's not going to happen anytime soon. We're not going to see a war between China and the US anytime soon. Some believe this because the US can't afford it. Some believe this because they think maybe cooler heads will prevail. There will be a nuclear catastrophe and everyone loses. Some people believe that China is just ready to fight such a war, so the United States just better not dare, or they will find out that they've bitten more than they can chew. But I would caution against this idea that those factors and scenarios alone rule out the possibility of a war. I was one who did not believe that Russia would have to intervene in Ukraine, but I was wrong. I didn't know what was happening in the back channels of the Russian government, what they were discussing. In fact, Russia had believed for quite a long time that it was time to intervene in the Donbass, to secure the republics, to defend them from the Ukrainian regime's shelling and constant bombardment of military provocation and interventionism from the coup onward in 2014. So I was wrong to underestimate. I wanted to believe that it wasn't going to happen. And believe me, I want to believe that there won't be a conflict by proxy or direct intervention over Taiwan. But at the same time, these times are very uh, uh, um, seismic in character, that they are incredibly difficult to predict because the instability of the empire, the neocon imperial project, the overall warfare state, the military regime, the unipolar order as a whole, US dominance in all spheres, it is more fragile than it's ever been. And its desperation is probably at an all time high from at least this period of the post Soviet era. So, with desperation at an all time high, with history being where it is right now, I think we need to understand that each and every provocation like this is actually increasing the likelihood of war in real time. And that the only thing really stopping war at this moment is China. And you could have made the same arguments about Russia. Russia was the one who went through with the Minsk Accords. Russia was the one who drafted real security guarantees. Russia was the one who had been asking for real legitimate talks year after year after year. Russia was the one that wanted to sign a peace agreement back in April of 2022, early April, late March. Russia was the one that was serious about diplomacy. China here has been the one that has called upon the all parties to respect the one China principle that is recognized by international law, UN Resolution 2758. It's calling the United States to respect the three joint communiques outlining supposedly its respect for the one China principle, and of course to warn all other countries involved that indeed they have international commitments to this as well, and that separatism is a violation of China's sovereignty that will not be tolerated, and that the warning after warning after warning is not that there's a military intervention coming. It's that it would be a last resort to prevent Taiwan from becoming so-called independent. That Taiwan is thousands of years before Japanese colonialism and post 1971, when China was admitted to the United Nations, the People's Republic of China as the rightful government, that overall, in totality, has thousands of years as being part of China, as being identified as China culturally, as having a large indigenous population at one time that had interactions with China, with ancient China. So the idea that the United States has the right to dictate any of this uh, is in and of itself the root cause of the problem. It is what is driving conflict. And the more that it drives deeper and deeper and drills deeper and deeper into this end game, the more likely we are going to see a war. And China said it in that opinion article, in that editorial, that Global Times editorial. This is China's position, that it is driving the two sides into a military conflict each and every time that Taiwan and the US show that their military coordination is strengthening and increasing. And the Biden administration has been on a flurry, has been on an absolute rampage, even as it's caught in this quagmire in Ukraine. It still has the will, the interests, the drive, and ultimately the desire to pursue this reckless agenda. So we should also, if Joe Biden's addled neocon brain can muster up with, of course, his handlers, this pursuit of war with China over Taiwan, then we should understand that there is a legitimate strategic, if we can call it strategy, pursuit of such a scenario. And that means that it could happen because if we underestimate it, like some of us did, myself included, during the Ukraine buildup, then we perhaps make the same mistake and the consequences could be even more severe. So the point is that training troops from Taiwan in the US is a major provocation. It's one that's not receiving any attention, but it is one that leads down a very slippery slope. And it doesn't matter if it maybe happened before or whether US troop presence remains pretty limited in Taiwan. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there's tens of billions of US dollars in worth in weapons going to Taiwan. And the US is making symbolic gesture after symbolic gesture backed up by policy that violates the one China principle, which is China's red line. And eventually, these violations are going to build up into a major conflict if they are not stopped. So the point is to stop them. We have to stop them. We have to stop them because the world cannot afford another major conflict like what happened in Ukraine and like what will likely happen in Ukraine permanently or for the time being. The world cannot afford the United States and whoever it's dragging along with it to sacrifice the interests of humanity for what truly is a dirty, vile, and absolutely reckless pursuit of hegemony in a war with China. It is just not in the cards. None of us will survive it. And that's why we must oppose it. That's why we need to cover this seriously, seriously, not as just, well, it happened and at least it's not Ukraine yet, or it happened, but look, there's all kinds of factors at play. No, we cannot underestimate not the stupidity, the recklessness, the impulsiveness, and also of the empire, of the United States as empire, and how that impulsiveness, recklessness, and impulsivity is rooted in real core interests. And that is China must be contained, China must be weakened. That is an existential cause that is not going to be dropped. There are every single section of the elite, from the business class to the military class, to the intelligence apparatus, the deep state. We can go on and on and on. They all agree with this to a large degree. Even if there are some semblance, some worries about it. Doesn't matter. Worries about the tech war, worries about economy from the business class, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they do not want to see China thrive because China does things differently. And China will never let the US elite, the monopolists and the banks and the corporatists and the capitalists, never let them get everything that they want. And that is, in the final analysis, unacceptable.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.